The night before my wedding, I found my sister in bed with my fiancé. In her panic, she fell and miscarried. And just like that, I was painted as the cruel, heartless villain. You've done wrong, and now you must be punished. My husband-to-be, in league with my own parents, forced me to sign away our marriage, and then personally drove me to a psychiatric facility. When I finally got out, it was just in time for their wedding. I didn't crash the reception and cause a scene, as everyone expected. Instead, I boarded a plane and vanished from their lives completely. 8 years later, I saw Ashton Blackwood again, standing outside the emergency room. A sudden, jarring reunion. He was in a frantic rush, getting his pregnant wife checked in. The moment I looked up to begin the consultation, our eyes met. Nora. He froze, his gaze instinctively dropping to my wrist, to the jagged, faded scar that marred the skin. Your scar. He started, his voice catching in his throat. He seemed desperate to say more, but the icy wall in my expression made him swallow the words. Unauthorized personnel, please step aside. My tone was flat, clinical, as if we were complete strangers. After the procedure, I calmly explained the restrictions for her recovery and medication. Ashton pretended to listen, but his eyes were adrift, constantly returning to me. Finally, he asked a question that was miles over the line. Why didn't you ever come back home? We searched for you for a long time. Just then, a small, clear voice cut through the tension. Mommy, when are we eating? Andy is hungry. Ashton's head snapped toward the sound, his eyes landing on a small face that was a startling echo of his own. That child, is he? A nurse came over just then, asking for my signature on a chart. I gave Ashton a curt nod, took my son's hand, and turned to leave without another word. Mommy, who was that man? My son asked, tilting his head back to look up at me with curious eyes. My voice was devoid of any emotion. A patient's family. But it looked like he was about to cry. He just kept staring at us. I didn't break my stride. You saw wrong. My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, who usually watched Andy for me, had an emergency, which is why I'd had to bring him to work. Thankfully, she had just called to say she was on her way. That night, a soft autumn rain began to fall outside my window. I finished my work, my body aching with exhaustion, and walked back to my office. I never expected to find Ashton waiting there. My brow furrowed. Mr. Blackwood, is there something you need? My cold formality seemed to catch him off guard. There's no need for concern, Mr. Blackwood. Your wife's condition is not serious. Just ensure she attends her follow-up appointments. I spoke to him as I would any other stranger. Perhaps the words, your wife, stung him. I could see a tempest of emotions swirling behind his gaze. He opened his mouth, but all that came out was a dry, raspy, thank you. If there's nothing else, I'll be leaving. The doctor on call can assist you with any further questions. I gave him a slight nod and walked away. As I passed the security desk, the guard, a friendly man I knew well, leaned out. Nora, wasn't that Mr. Blackwood? The one with the fancy car? He looks like a real big shot. I nodded. Yes. Making that kind of money so young must be nice, he mused. I hear he and his wife are inseparable. Someone said they came to the coast to pray for the health of their unborn baby. His voice was filled with the average person's fascination with the lives of the wealthy. I didn't respond. Yes, Mr. and Mrs. Blackwood were inseparable now. And his wife, Lila, had a husband who adored her, parents who doted on her, and a child on the way. She had everything that was once supposed to be mine. And almost no one remembered how she got it. My phone vibrated, pulling me from my thoughts. Sorry, something came up with a project. I'll be a little late to pick you up. A small smile touched my lips as my fingers danced across the screen. Focus on your work. I can get home myself. The reply was almost instant. Be safe. Text me when you get home. Tucking my phone away, I noticed the rain was coming down harder, with no sign of letting up. I waited for what felt like an eternity, but the rideshare app just kept spinning, no cars available. Honk. A car horn blared behind me. A black Bentley Mulsanne pulled up to the curb. I knew that car. The license plate was Lila's birthday. Mine was the very next day. The passenger window rolled down, revealing Ashton's profile. Get in. I'll give you a ride. Glancing at the still loading icon on my phone, I hesitated for only a second before pulling open the back door and sliding in, giving him the address of my apartment complex. I was bone tired, and the damp weather was making the old injuries in my wrist and abdomen ache with a dull, persistent throb. A free ride was a free ride. No point in refusing. Ashton was a creature of habit, almost obsessively so. In our time together, I wasn't even allowed to place a new air freshener in the car without his permission. But now, the car was filled with the cool, woody scent of sandalwood, Lila's favorite. A minimalist Nordic figurine, her preferred style, sat on the dashboard. Seeing me in the back seat, Ashton gave a bitter smile. So you're really treating me like a chauffeur? I just don't want to give your wife the wrong idea, I said, my voice cool. The phrase, your wife, acted like a kill switch, strangling any words he might have been about to say. The air in the car grew heavy and suffocating. I turned my head to watch the city lights blur past the window, letting the silence hang. The streaking lights pulled my mind back 8 years, to the darkest day of my life. It was the day before Ashton and I were supposed to get married. I was brimming with excitement, dreaming of becoming his wife. I never imagined that when I pushed open the door to our home, I would walk in on him and my sister, Lila, entangled in our wedding suite, on our wedding bed. They were so lost in each other that they didn't notice me standing in the doorway for a long, silent moment. Not until Lila's eyes finally found mine. "Nora," she shrieked, her eyes wide with shock. I thought that being caught red-handed would make Ashton panic, or at least show a flicker of shame. He did neither. The very first thing he did was pull the blanket up, covering the incriminating marks on Lila's body. "What are you doing here?" he asked, his voice laced with the annoyance of someone whose private moment had been interrupted. Back then, I had no tolerance for betrayal. In that single instant, humiliation and rage consumed me. I became a screaming madwoman, hurling every vicious word I could think of at them, swiping everything I could reach off the dressers and tables. The room was a disaster. Lila cowered behind Ashton, trembling. "Nora, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for this to happen. Ashton and I, we're in love." Her voice was a choked sob, her eyes glistening like a white lily beaten down by a storm, the picture of pitiable innocence. A far cry from the seductive woman with bedroom eyes I had seen moments before. Ashton shielded her with his body, his glare a condemnation. "You're scaring her. Look at yourself. You're acting like a shrew." He was right. I felt like a monster. I took their picture and blasted it across social media and our family group chat. I wanted everyone to see their disgusting, ugly truth. The photo had barely been up for a minute before my parents called. "Nora, have you lost your mind? Take that down right now. If that gets out, how is Lila supposed to face anyone?" My parents had always favored Lila. She was sickly as a child in and out of hospitals, so they gave her everything she ever wanted, spoiling her rotten. And I, as the older sister, was expected to put her first, to yield to her in everything, without question. My birthday was only a day after hers, so my parents forced me to celebrate mine early, combining it with hers. But at every party, Lila was always the star. I just never imagined their favoritism would extend to something as sordid as this. "You and Ashton should get a divorce." My sister was sleeping with my fiancé, and instead of reprimanding her, my parents were telling me to step aside and let them be together. "Why?" I screamed, the injustice of physical weight on my chest. It was her mistake, so why was I the one who had to give up my life? Their hearts were hopelessly biased. My chest felt like it was being crushed by a boulder, each breath a new wave of pain. "Lila is your sister. As the older one, you should give way to her," my father said, his voice thick with annoyance, as if my defiance was a personal inconvenience. I instinctively looked at Ashton, the man who had sworn he loved me more than life itself. He just stood there, watching it all unfold with a cold detachment, offering no explanation. Lila was nestled safely in his arms. "Nora, he doesn't love you anymore," she whimpered. "We're the ones in love. Please just let us be together, okay? You still have the nerve to call him your brother-in-law?" I spat. "Have you no shame?" Blinded by rage, I lunged forward and slapped her across the face. In the ensuing chaos, Lila lost her footing and fell to the floor with a sharp cry. She let out a pained gasp, her face turning chalk-white as she clutched her stomach. "Lila." Ashton's expression changed instantly. "My stomach. It hurt so much," she moaned, her voice trembling as the color drained from her face. Ashton swept her into his arms and raced for the hospital, pausing only to throw a look of pure hatred over his shoulder at me. But I saw it clearly. She had lost her balance on her own. It was only then that I understood. They hadn't just started. They had been sneaking around for a long time, long enough for a child to have been conceived. A few hours later, the doctors confirmed the baby was lost. "Are you happy now?" My mother hissed, her body shaking with rage as she slapped me hard across the face. My cheek went numb, a loud ringing filling my ears. But no physical pain could compare to the agony tearing my heart apart. Everyone blamed me for Lila losing her baby. They demanded I get on my knees and beg for her forgiveness. Of course I refused. The price of my defiance was steep. Ashton and my parents conspired, claiming I was emotionally unstable with violent tendencies, and had me forcibly committed to a remote psychiatric facility. "You did wrong, so you must be punished," Ashton had said. "When you've had time to think about what you did and realize your mistake, we'll come get you." A cold, bitter laugh rose in my throat. Come back? Where was there to come back to? The moment I saw them together, I had already lost my place in the world. The days in that facility were a sunless blur. By the time my body was a wreck and my spirit was shattered, I was rushed to a hospital on the brink of death. While I was fighting for my life, my husband and my parents were on a vacation abroad with my sister, helping her relax and recover. It took a grueling 8-hour surgery to pull me back from the edge. When Ashton and my parents finally arrived at the hospital, I was already in a regular room. But as he looked at my skeletal frame, at the hollowed-out stranger in the hospital bed, the first words out of Ashton's mouth were, "Do you know what you did wrong now?" His voice was as cold and hard as stone. "And don't forget you still owe Lila an apology. You made her lose her child, and she's still not over it. She almost fell into a depression. You should use this time to think about how you're going to make it up to her." Sorrow deeper than death washed over me. If my heart had died when they sent me to that facility, Ashton's words now grounded into dust. In that moment, I didn't even have the strength left to argue. My voice was an empty whisper, devoid of any feeling. I know. I was wrong. I was wrong. Wrong to have been so blind. To have loved a man as cruel and heartless as Ashton. Wrong to have foolishly hoped for affection from parents who so clearly played favorites. Ashton kept glancing at me in the rearview mirror, opening his mouth to speak several times, then closing it again. The silence stretched until the car came to a smooth stop in front of my building. I got out and offered a polite, detached thank you. Thanks for the ride. Just as I turned to leave, he couldn't hold it in any longer. "Nora." I turned back, waiting. "Why are you living in a place like this?" he asked, his eyes scanning the rundown complex. "These past years, have they been hard for you?" The streetlights were dim, casting long shadows on the peeling paint of the old buildings. Everything looked worn and tired. His eyes were red-rimmed, his voice hoarse. "If you need help, that won't be necessary. I'm doing very well, but thank you for your concern." I didn't understand. How could the man who so callously threw me into the abyss now put on this act of deep, heartfelt concern? Ashton didn't believe me, convinced I was just being stubborn. "Nora, you don't have to lie to me. I can see it. I know you resent me," he continued. "But even if we're not together, we're still family." A small, humorless laugh escaped my lips. My expression was distant, almost bored. "You must be joking, Mr. Blackwood. From the day I chose to leave, I no longer had a family. I would never forget those lonely days recovering in the hospital. After that first day, no one ever came to visit again. It was through the news on my phone that I learned the Blackwood and Miller families were busy planning a lavish wedding for Ashton and Lila. My parents, to prevent me from causing any trouble, had even instructed the hospital to keep me under strict watch. But they all underestimated me. On their wedding day, I didn't show up to make a scene. I simply boarded a plane and flew away. As the plane took off, the night sky over the entire city of Crestwood was lit up by a spectacular fireworks display, celebrating their union. I thought I would never have to cross paths with those people again. But life is unpredictable. Fate, it seems, has a twisted sense of humor. "Nora, do you really hate me that much? Between us?" Ashton's voice was urgent, his emotions fraying. I cut him off before he could finish. "There is no us. That ended 8 years ago." Hate. In the beginning, right after I left, of course I hated him. But 8 years is a long time. People change. The entanglements with Ashton and my family were burdens I had long since set down. Ashton's voice was raw. "But that boy. I knew it. I knew that after seeing Andy, his mind would start racing. Andy has nothing to do with you. Ashton and I, we were supposed to have a child. I had planned to tell him on our wedding day, a joyful surprise. Instead, he gave me a much bigger, much more horrifying surprise. The stay in the facility left me with a permanent scar on my wrist. The nerve damage was so severe that for a time, I couldn't even use my right hand properly. But far more devastating was the internal trauma, the damage to my abdomen. It cost me my child. Impossible. Don't lie to me, he looks so much like me." Ashton was convinced, refusing to believe my words. I cut him off again, my voice sharp. "Believe what you want, but the child is not yours. So please stay out of our lives." "I'm sorry," he whispered, his voice thick with a pain he could no longer suppress. "Back then, I'm so sorry for what I did to you." He was about to say more when a warm, kind voice called out from behind me. "Nora dear, why are you just standing out here? Come on up." It was Mrs. Gable. She'd gotten worried when I didn't come home, and had come down to check on me. She looked at the emotionally overwrought Ashton with a puzzled expression. "And who is this?" "A patient's family member. He gave me a ride home." I turned back to him. "Thank you for the lift. I have a busy day tomorrow. Good night." I gave a slight nod, then went to Mrs. Gable, linking my arm through hers as we walked into the building. "What kept you so late again today?" she chided gently. "I told you I'm perfectly fine. You don't need to keep checking on me. I worry about you living alone, especially since you won't move in with me," I said, leaning my head on her shoulder like a child. This playful, carefree version of me was something Ashton hadn't seen in 8 long years. A deep, agonizing pain flickered in his eyes. 8 years ago, when I fled Crestwood, I arrived in this small coastal city, Port Blossom, a broken woman. Mrs. Gable took me in when I was at my lowest. She gave me a warmth and kindness I hadn't felt in years, and with it, the courage to start living again. I don't know when Ashton finally left. Frankly, I didn't care. I only knew that when I left for work the next morning, the spot where his car had been parked was littered with cigarette butts. The pile of cigarette butts outside my apartment complex was swept away by the morning rain, leaving nothing but a faint, bitter scent on the damp pavement. I didn't spare the empty parking spot a second glance. My life had moved on from Ashton Blackwood long ago. His guilt, however belated, was not my burden to carry. When I arrived at the hospital, the morning rush was already in full swing. I changed into my white coat, reviewed the overnight charts, and stepped out into the corridor. He was there. Ashton was leaning against the wall near the nurse's station. He looked terrible. The pristine, tailored suits he always wore with such effortless arrogance were completely wrinkled. His tie was missing, his collar unbuttoned, and deep, bruised shadows sat beneath his bloodshot eyes. He looked like a man who had spent the entire night tearing his own mind apart. The moment he saw me, he pushed himself off the wall. "Nora." "Mr. Blackwood." I replied, my voice perfectly level. "If you are looking for the OB/GYN ward, you're on the wrong floor." "I'm not looking for the ward," he said, his voice grating and hollow. He stepped closer, though he kept a careful distance, as if terrified I might shatter if he moved too fast. "I need to talk to you. Please. Just 5 minutes. I have rounds in exactly 2 minutes. If this isn't a medical emergency, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "It's about the past." "There is no past." I cut him off, my gaze meeting his with the cold, sterile precision of a scalpel. "The woman you knew died in that psychiatric facility 8 years ago. You made sure of that. I am Dr. Reed now. And frankly, Mr. Blackwood, you are interfering with my work." His breath hitched. He stared at me, searching my face for any flicker of the girl who used to look at him like he hung the moon. He found nothing. Only a polished, impenetrable surface. "Dr. Reed." A deep, resonant voice called out from the end of the hallway. I looked past Ashton, and for the first time that morning, a genuine smile broke through my professional mask. Walking toward us was Julian. He was dressed in a sleek charcoal overcoat, a pair of architectural blueprints tucked casually under one arm. With his sharp jawline, piercing dark eyes, and an aura of quiet, unshakable authority, Julian commanded the space the moment he entered it. Trailing right beside him, holding tightly to his hand, was Andy. "Daddy said we could bring you breakfast since he was late last night." Andy cheered, letting go of Julian to run toward me. I knelt down, catching my son in my arms and pressing a kiss to his forehead. Julian stopped beside us, handing me a paper bag carrying the scent of fresh croissants and dark roast coffee. The site inspection ran late. I figured the least I could do was bribe my wife with her favorite bakery. I stood up, resting my hand comfortably against Julian's waist. "You're forgiven." I felt the sudden, suffocating drop in the air pressure before I even looked at Ashton. Ashton was staring at Julian as if he were looking at a ghost. All the remaining color drained from his face, leaving him a sickening shade of gray. His eyes darted from Julian to Andy, and then slowly, horrifyingly, the realization settled in his bones. "Julian." Ashton breathed, the name barely making it past his lips. What are you doing here?" Julian shifted his gaze to Ashton. His expression didn't change, but his eyes grew fractionally colder. Julian Reed was Ashton's estranged older half-brother, the brilliant, illegitimate son their father had driven away years ago, who had since built an architectural empire on the West Coast that dwarfed the Blackwood family's inherited wealth. "Hello, Ashton," Julian said evenly. His hand slid from my waist to rest protectively on my lower back. "I'm dropping off breakfast for my wife and my son. The better question is, what are you doing harassing them?" Ashton staggered back half a step, shaking his head. "You're your wife? Nora is." "Nora Reed," Julian corrected him softly. "And if I ever hear that you've cornered her outside her office again, I won't be having this conversation with you in a public hallway. Are we clear?" Ashton couldn't speak. He looked at Andy, the dark hair, the shape of the eyes. The resemblance that had tortured Ashton last night wasn't because the boy was his. It was because the boy was his brother's. The profound, agonizing irony of it struck Ashton so hard I thought his knees might buckle. The woman he had thrown away, the woman he had allowed his family to destroy, was now married to the brother his family had always feared and resented. "Let's go, Nora," Julian said gently, guiding me toward my office. "You have rounds." I didn't look back at Ashton. I didn't need to. By noon, the hospital was buzzing. I had just finished a complex consultation when my pager beeped with an urgent request from the front lobby. There was a disturbance. When I stepped out of the elevator, I heard her before I saw her. "Where is she? Bring her out right now." Lila was standing near the reception desk, her pregnant belly prominent beneath a designer maternity dress. Her face was flushed, her eyes wide and manic as she yelled at the security guards. 8 years hadn't changed her much. She still used her fragility as a weapon, clutching her stomach and gasping for breath, forcing everyone around her to walk on eggshells. "Ma'am, you need to lower your voice," the head nurse was saying, trying to usher her to a seating area. "Don't touch me. My husband has been here all morning. I know she's here. Nora." She spotted me. Lila froze, her chest heaving as she took in the sight of me in my pristine white coat, holding a clipboard. I didn't look like the broken, screaming mess she had last seen. I looked completely untouchable. "You," Lila hissed, pushing past the guards and marching toward me. I knew it. I checked Ashton's phone location. He was here all last night, and came back this morning. "You're trying to steal him back, aren't you? After everything you did to me." A few patients and nurses stopped to stare. I remained perfectly still, my expression utterly bored. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said, my voice projecting clearly through the quiet lobby. "This is a hospital, not a soap opera. If you require medical attention, take a number. If you are here to throw a tantrum, security will escort you to the parking lot." "How dare you talk to me like that?" Lila shrieked, tears immediately springing to her eyes. She placed a protective hand over her belly, her voice trembling with practiced victimhood. "You murdered my first baby. You ruined my life. And now you're trying to ruin my marriage because you're jealous." Murmurs rippled through the onlookers. I sighed, a sound of profound exhaustion. I stepped closer to her, closing the distance until I was looking down at her. "Let me make something abundantly clear to you, Lila," I said, my voice dropping to a low, icy register that only she could hear. "I don't want your husband. He is a coward who couldn't keep his pants zipped, and you are the vulture who thought his scraps were a 5-star meal. You two deserve exactly what you are, each other." Lila gasped, her face turning pale. "You. And as for the past," I continued, my eyes locking onto hers. "Do not ever play the victim with me. You and I both know you tripped yourself that day. You sacrificed your own child just to get me out of the picture. So don't come into my hospital and preach to me about murder." Lila stumbled back as if I had struck her physically. I didn't. You pushed me." "Keep telling yourself that if it helps you sleep at night," I said smoothly. I turned to the guards. "Escort this woman out. If she resists, call the police." "Nora," another voice. A voice I hadn't heard in 8 years, carrying the same arrogant, entitled tone that had haunted my childhood. I turned slowly. Walking through the sliding glass doors were my parents. My mother looked horrified, while my father's face was twisted in a scowl of righteous anger. They rushed immediately to Lila's side, my mother wrapping her arms around her golden child. "Nora, what is wrong with you?" my mother snapped, glaring at me as if I were a stranger who had just attacked her family. "Your sister is pregnant with a high-risk baby. How can you speak to her like that? We heard you were working here, but we didn't want to believe you could still be so bitter." I looked at the people who had given me life, the people who had signed the papers to lock me in a windowless room, who had ignored my begging, my tears, my absolute despair. I felt nothing. The space inside my chest where my love for them used to live was completely hollowed out. "Who let you in?" I asked plainly. "We are your parents," my father barked, stepping forward. "You disappeared for 8 years, causing your mother endless grief, and the first thing you do when we find you is bully your sister? You are going to apologize to Lila, right now. And since you work here, you will personally ensure she gets the best care for her pregnancy. It's the least you can do to make up for the child you killed." I actually laughed. It was a short, dry sound that echoed in the quiet lobby. "You truly are delusional," I said, shaking my head. I looked at the security guard. "Frank, call the police. I want these 3 trespass from the premises." "You wouldn't dare," my mother shrieked. "I am your mother. I gave birth to you, and you signed my rights away to a psych ward so your favorite daughter could steal my fiancé." I replied, my voice ringing out clearly. The gasps from the surrounding nurses and patients were audible. My parents froze, realizing that their dirty laundry was being aired in public. "You ceased to be my parents 8 years ago. If you don't leave this building in 10 seconds, I will press harassment charges." Before they could formulate a response, the heavy glass doors slid open again. Ashton rushed in out of breath, having clearly been summoned by Lila's frantic texts. He took one look at the scene, Lila sobbing in our mother's arms, my father red-faced with rage, and me, standing like an untouchable queen in the center of it all. "Ashton," Lila cried, breaking away from my mother and throwing herself at him. "She's threatening us. She told security to throw us out. Ashton, do something." Ashton didn't hug her back. His arms remained rigidly at his sides. He looked over her head, his bloodshot eyes meeting mine. "Lila," Ashton said, his voice terrifyingly quiet. "Stop." "What?" Lila blinked, looking up at him in confusion. I said stop. He suddenly roared, his voice cracking with an agony that made everyone in the lobby flinch. He grabbed Lila by the shoulders and pushed her away from him. "Stop lying. Stop playing the victim." My parents stepped forward, shocked. "Ashton, what is the meaning of this? She is your wife," my father demanded. "She is a liar." Ashton screamed, his composure completely shattering. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, slamming it onto the reception desk so hard the wood groaned. I spent the morning making some calls, Ashton said, his chest heaving as tears finally spilled down his face. He looked at me, a look of such absolute, crushing despair that it was almost pitiful. Julian gave me a hint, and I finally looked into the medical records from 8 years ago. Lila's face drained of all color. She began to shake uncontrollably. Aston, no, you can't. You weren't going to have our baby, Lila, Ashton said, his voice dropping into a ragged whisper. The records from Crestwood General, the amniocentesis you had done in secret 2 weeks before the wedding. The fetus had anencephaly. It was incompatible with life. You were already scheduled for a surgical termination the Monday after the wedding. The silence in the lobby was deafening. Even my parents looked stunned, turning slowly to stare at Lila. No. My mother whispered. Lila, what is he talking about? Ashton wasn't finished. He turned to me, his tears falling freely now. She knew the baby wouldn't survive. She knew Nora had found out about us. So she threw herself to the floor. She used a dying fetus to frame her own sister, just to make sure I would hate Nora enough to lock her away. And I helped her. Ashton dropped to his knees right there in the middle of the hospital lobby. The great, untouchable Ashton Blackwood, weeping like a broken child. I did this, he sobbed, his hands covering his face. I locked you away. I let them hurt you. I let you lose our baby in that place. Oh God, Nora, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I stood there, looking down at the wreckage of the people who had destroyed my life. My parents were staring at Lila in absolute horror. All their blind favoritism, all their cruel justifications, had been built on a foundation of pure manipulation. Lila was hyperventilating, backing away from her husband and her parents, shaking her head frantically. It wasn't my fault, she screamed, cornered. I loved you. Nora always had everything. She had the perfect grades, the perfect fiancé. Why did I always have to be the sick one? Why couldn't I have what she had? Because you're hollow inside, I said calmly. I stepped past Ashton, who was still weeping on the floor. I didn't stop to comfort him. I didn't offer him forgiveness. His guilt was his own to live with. My absolution would not save him. I looked at my parents, who were now staring at me with a sickening mixture of guilt and pleading. Nora. My mother choked out, taking a step toward me. We didn't know. Oh, Nora, my baby. Don't call me that, I said, my voice as cold as absolute zero. You made your choice 8 years ago. You chose your monster. Now you get to live with her. I turned my back on them and walked toward the elevators. Dr. Reed. Frank, the security guard, said softly as I passed. Call the police, Frank, I said without looking back. And get these people out of my hospital. The fallout was swift and absolute. Within a month, the Blackwood family was consumed by scandal. Ashton filed for a brutal, highly publicized divorce. Lila, abandoned by the husband she had schemed to steal and facing the reality of her lies, suffered a genuine breakdown. The stress of the divorce proceedings and the public humiliation caused severe complications with her current pregnancy. She was placed on bed rest in a different hospital, entirely alone. My parents tried to contact me every day. They sent letters, flowers, voicemails filled with weeping apologies. I blocked their numbers and returned every package unopened. They had bankrupted their souls to protect Lila. And now they were left with a daughter they could no longer trust and a daughter who no longer existed to them. Ashton resigned as CEO of his company, unable to function. He left Crestwood, disappearing into a quiet, miserable obscurity. I heard through the grapevine that he had checked himself into a psychiatric facility. The ultimate, poetic irony. He was finally serving the sentence he had given me. But none of that mattered to me. The past was finally, truly dead. 6 months later, on a crisp autumn evening, I stood on the balcony of the home Julian and I had built together, looking out over the Pacific Ocean. The sunset painted the water in shades of brilliant gold and deep violet. I felt a pair of strong arms wrap around my waist from behind. Julian pressed a soft kiss to the side of my neck, his warmth grounding me instantly. Andy is finally asleep, Julian murmured, resting his chin on my shoulder. He made me read the dinosaur book 3 times. I leaned back against his chest, smiling. He gets his stubbornness from you. He gets his brilliance from his mother, Julian countered gently. He turned me around in his arms, his dark eyes searching my face. He traced the faint, faded scar on my wrist with his thumb, not with pity, but with a quiet, profound reverence for the woman who had survived it. Are you happy, Dr. Reed? He asked softly. I looked at the man who had found me in the dark, who hadn't tried to fix me, but had simply stood by my side while I rebuilt myself piece by piece. I thought of my brilliant son sleeping down the hall. I thought of the peace that now lived inside my chest, vast and unbroken. I whispered, reaching up to cup his face. For the first time in my life, I am exactly where I'm supposed to be. Julian smiled, leaning down to capture my lips with his. Outside, the tide rolled in, washing the shoreline clean, leaving nothing behind but the beautiful, endless expanse of the sea.